There's a quarterback in the portal named Fernando Mendoza. The Badgers need to go all in. I'm going to tell you why they need to empty the NIL clip on him.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, as always. Today, we're talking about Daniel O'Neal, quarterback coming to visit pretty soon, that 25 schedule. Why it's not as bad as people are making it out to be. But first up, Fernando Mendoza. We are going to talk about one of the biggest portal needs and targets of this class. But first, today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the app, create the account, use Locked On for $20 off your first purchase over at GameTime. Okay. First of all, thank you for everyone tuning in, wherever you're at, whether you're watching it in the car and listening at home. Well, actually, you shouldn't be watching in the car. Whether you're listening in the car or watching at home, whatever it is, thank you all so much as always. Let's talk Fernando Mendoza. Let's talk about how the Badgers may address their biggest need with one of the biggest targets in the portal. So Fernando Mendoza, if you haven't been paying attention or maybe you're not checking out what every other team's roster is doing in the portal, because why would you? That's insane. Fernando Mendoza, 6'5", about 225-pound sophomore quarterback out of Cal, has started for 2 years at Cal. He's entered the portal. Listed schools that have interest, that have contacted him, that are schools of target. It's Mississippi State so far, Indiana, UCLA, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's in this mix. They're a school that's interested in him. They would love to get him. It's not going to be an easy battle, right? You're fighting Indiana, that's in the playoffs right now with a hot coach. They have a lot of money. Shockingly enough, like Indiana is going to be a tough battle here. You're also fighting Mississippi State, so an SEC school. You're fighting UCLA, which is closer to where he's at now. He's originally from Miami, so I don't know if there's like a huge West Coast draw to keep him there, but there is a school out there that wants him. Let's talk about the player first, and then let's talk about how he would fit and what are the odds here. Fernando Mendoza, 6'5", 225-pound kid. He's thrown for 4,700 yards in his career, over 600 passes. Last year, he threw for 3,000 yards, 68% completion percentage, 16 touchdowns, 6 picks. So he takes care of the ball. Not a ton of rushing yards, but a mobile quarterback. He's the type of mobile that you really like because he can take off and run. He can get downfield. He's got good size, but he wants to throw it. He looks to throw first. He will make people miss in the backfield. He'll make that free rusher that defensive coordinators will scheme up, the guy screaming off the edge. Mendoza can make that player miss. He makes that free rusher miss, drives defensive coordinators nuts, then will extend the play and find an open receiver. Really good arm. Good arm. Again, 6'5". Just as Badger fans, like how many tip passes have we seen the last couple of years? I mean, just it's a killer. You're not going to get that with a guy like Fernando Mendoza. Good delivery, big arm, good touch, 68% completion percentage, and he really was the guidepost to that Cal offense. Jaden Ott, who Badger fans may have remembered was a running back target at one point, was hurt most of this year. They didn't have a very good offensive line. Their transfer receivers didn't really work out. This is from a newspaper that covering Cal called the Daily Cal. Quote, Mendoza has kept the Bears afloat all year, looked like a starry-eyed NFL prospect, and has emerged as a clear face of Cal's football program, speaking at every media availability. Cal running back Javian Thomas says he's the real leader, vocal. Make sure everybody is on point, not only himself, but everybody in the offense is down with the things they got to do. Like everything you hear about this kid, leader, intangibles, tough. He takes a ton of hits, just kept getting up, dusting himself off. Oh, and he's a physically talented player. This is one of the top players in the portal, one of the top quarterbacks in the portal. And the Badgers have a shot here. They have legitimate interest. This is the type of player you bring in, and this instantly creates excitement around the program. This is the type of player that will sell receivers to come to Madison. If you have a Fernando Mendoza as your quarterback, you're going to be able to sell receivers to come to Madison. This is the type of player that makes read options, the type of stuff that Coach Jeff Grimes wants to do offensively as an offensive coordinator. This is the type of quarterback that can make some of those things happen. He's going to keep defenses on their toes, right? They're going to have to respect his ability to keep it. Like even when Locke kept it, defenses didn't respect his ability to run with it. They were just crashing down the entire time. This is a player that can gash a defense in this, especially in Grimes' offense. But he's a really good thrower too. He's a better thrower than we've had probably since. I mean, I think he's a better thrower than Jack Cohn. I think this would be probably the best quarterback Wisconsin has had And again, this is a low bar. You can make all the jokes you want to make. This is probably the best quarterback if they were to able to land a Fernando Mendoza. This would be the biggest get since Russell Wilson. This is a trajectory changer in a sense, not in a sense that Wisconsin's a playoff team next year, because there are many other holes on this team. Don't mistake it. But this could be another win or two on the roster. You get a quarterback like this. Again, I don't think Wisconsin's as far off necessarily as a lot of people think. Wisconsin was 5-7 last year with, I believe, the 17th ranked passing attack in the Big Ten. You get a Fernando Mendoza, that passing attack and that passing offense and that passing efficiency, it's going to be a at least top half of the Big Ten type of offense, I think. You do that, you're 7-5 next year. And while that's not great, it is progress. While that's not setting the world on fire, while that's not getting Wisconsin back to where they want to be, it is moving up, right? And you're setting the table for that 2026 schedule where it evens out a little bit. And then, by the way, Mendoza has 2 years of eligibility left. So this isn't just, how many times have we talked about you have to stop cycling transfer portal quarterbacks? You get a Tanner Mordecai, and then he leaves, and you get a Tyler Van Dyke, and then he leaves. Now you're getting another transfer portal quarterback. This is a player who you could get in, you could keep him for 2 years, you could build some continuity. What else does that do? It allows you to build up depth behind him. You don't have to go to the portal for a quarterback every single year. So you can focus on other needs. You can use those resources in other spots. It allows a guy like maybe Matt Toyer, Carter Smith, another quarterback we're about to talk about in a second year, Daniel O'Neal. It now allows some of the younger guys to grow, right? With where it's not a constant churn at that spot, and it gives you stability at the most important spot in football with a high leverage talent. This is going to be expensive. This is where, if you're Wisconsin, you got to push all the chips in to get a quarterback like this. You have to. There's no shortcuts to it. We talk about this all the time with Brian Smith. We talk about it with other people who come on the show as well. The top flight quarterbacks cost money. This guy's he's gonna cost money. Can you go up there and can you compete at that level? If you need to, do you have a few more chips you can push into the middle? That's what it's going to take. And it's going to be really frustrating if you see this play out and he lands at a school like Indiana, because it's going to mean Indiana just, not that Kurt Cignetti has nothing to sell. He absolutely does. They're in the playoffs this year. But I think we all kind of know that's a mirage. I think we all kind of know they're in the playoffs partially because of the schedule they have. I think we all kind of understand that to some degree. And Kurt Cignetti's a really good coach. Both of those things are true. But you still got to think that if you're Wisconsin, you can outsell Indiana unless it's just a money thing. And if he goes to Indiana, I'm going to feel like it might be a money thing. And that's going to be frustrating because you don't need to spend like Ohio State if you're Wisconsin, because you won't. Actually, you can't spend like Ohio State. You can't spend like Oregon. But when a player like this that seems to have interest in the program, when it comes available and you need it, can you push your chips into the middle of the table and say, all right, we need to win this one. We're going to be competitive. Time's going to tell, but this is a huge target for Wisconsin. If they can get Fernando Mendoza, the tenor of the offseason changes, the tenor of the program changes. He changes the offense, a really good quarterback. And this, I would say, this is a really good college quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's not probably one of the top 2 or 3 in the country, but this is a really good college quarterback. You get that. Your receivers get better. Your offensive line gets better. Your running game gets better because defenses have to respect the pass. Your RPO game gets better because he can run. Your third down conversions get better because he can take off and get that 3rd and 5 with his feet. You're going to have to use a quarterback spy at times, which frees up coverage. It just makes everything easier. Wisconsin's offense the last couple of years, it's been pushing a boulder up a hill because the quarterback play hasn't been good enough. And it makes everything else so hard, right? It's pulling our Treyu through the swamp of sadness. Wait, Artreo was the kid. But either way, it's if you get that reference, it just makes everything so hard when you can't even get good quarterback play. This guy would solve that. Doesn't solve all the things on the team for sure. He would solve that. They got to push all the chips in the middle of the table and try to get him if they can. They have to do it. All right, we're going to take a second for our friends of the show. Come back and talk about another quarterback that's visiting and why I think this is a 2-quarterback portal class and why I think Daniel O'Neal might be that other quarterback that's coming in. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our friends of the show over at GameTime. Listen, we've talked about GameTime a lot. It's great. I've used it personally. I've used it multiple times personally. I've gotten Braves tickets. I've gotten tickets to other events. My friend Dave has used it multiple times to get Baltimore Orioles tickets, and he was going to get hockey tickets with it. I think he's actually going to the hockey game this weekend with GameTime. GameTime's incredible. It's super fast. It's super easy. And we all want to do more stuff. This is like your taxi to do more things. This is opening up a gateway to do more things. Let's do more things in life, and you can do those things on GameTime. better tickets, faster prices, or they got flash deals so you get better prices at the end, panoramic views of the seats, and they got stuff to every event, every type of concert, every type of entertainment. It's not just sports. If you want to do more in life, go to GameTime and save money doing it. Download the GameTime app today. Use code Locked On for $20 off. Download the app, create your account, use code Locked On for $20 off. Snake the tickets without the stress over at GameTime. Terms do apply. Create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. All right, let's jump back into this. Let's talk Daniel O'Neal, another Badgers quarterback who will be visiting. Daniel O'Neal is an interesting one. So I just got done talking about Fernando Mendoza, right? That's the target. But this is also, you look at this quarterback room, you got to bring in two bodies. Unless you believe Milo Spasovic, the walk-on from last year, and Mabry Mettoyer and Carter Smith are all going to be ready potentially next year. You can't go into the 2025 season with no other depth because quarterbacks get hurt. How many years in a row at Wisconsin have we seen quarterbacks get hurt? We saw Graham Mertz get hurt. We saw Tyler Van Dyke get hurt. We saw Tanner Mordecai get hurt. We've seen Braden Locke get banged around. We've saw certainly Jack Cohn get hurt. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You have to have established backups. So even if you were to land the home run, you bring in Fernando Mendoza. Who's your backup next year? Is it Mabry Mettoyer? I like Mabry. I've talked about it a lot. I really like him. But are you comfortable with him as your number two, having never started a game as a redshirt freshman? I don't think so. Are you comfortable with Milo Spasovic as your number two? Absolutely not. Are you comfortable with Carter Smith, a true freshman, coming in as your backup? No. So you got to get two guys. You got to get another experienced player. Enter Daniel O'Neal. So Daniel O'Neal was San Diego State's starting quarterback last year as a true freshman. Started 11 games. Not a great season. A little inconsistent. Not a great runner. A little undersized. But he is coming to campus this weekend. I think he's the guy that they're going to land and look at him as this is our backup. This is a guy who started some games. He has real experience with bullets flying around. And at least if he comes in, we feel like we can orchestrate something around him. We feel like he can make calls at the line of scrimmage. We feel like he can take a hit. We feel like he can run some RPO. He can make some slants. Slants. I mean, he makes some basic throws. He's a little small. It actually kind of reminds you of Braden Locke. He's a little more mobile than Braden Locke. He was a 3-star quarterback in the 2024 class. Had some good offers, committed originally to Colorado before he decommitted, ended up at SDSU. He's okay. He's okay. But in some spots where you need depth, you just need okay. And here's the thing. You're not going to bring in two big-time portal quarterbacks for a multitude of reasons, right? Purse strings are the first one. You're not going to be able to afford it at Wisconsin. You're just not. But those guys aren't going to want to come in. You're not going to get two big-time guys that want to come in and compete either. Big-time quarterbacks in the portal, they want to go somewhere where they're going to be the starter. They don't want to come in and compete with another big-time guy. So one target is the Fernando Mendoza tier. You're looking for a starter, ideally a starter with multiple years that can help elevate the offense. Mendoza would do that. This other tier, we'll call it the Daniel O'Neal tier because he's visiting. You're looking for a guy who can step in an emergency. You're looking for a guy who maybe has a little bit of upside, who can be around for a couple years potentially to grow within that room. So that room, you need to keep building competition in that room, but not a guy who's going to come in and be the starter. So I think that's Daniel O'Neal. If you see that name being floated around, you go and look at the stats, you go and look at the highlights. Badger fans, might be a little underwhelmed, but understand that I think this is the depth piece. Okay, I think Daniel O'Neal is the guy who's coming in to help establish depth in the quarterback room. What does that mean for Mabry Mettoyer? That's an interesting question, right? He'll be in the same class as Mabry Mettoyer. He'll have more experience than Mabry. He will be the guy that this staff is bringing in. The new offensive coordinator, the new quarterbacks coach. I don't know. Like, that room has to compete. And if you're Mabry, you got to compete. You got to win your spot. And you got to try to win that backup spot. And if he does, that's great. And if he doesn't, it might be the end of the Mabry Mettoyer era. It's not something I'm rooting for. I think Mabry still has a lot of those physical tools that you get excited about, but clocks tick quickly on quarterbacks. And if you look at this room, you have Carter Smith coming in this class. They're going to bring somebody else in to compete with Mabry. If Mabry isn't rising up that depth chart with Carter Smith nipping at his heels, I don't know. It starts to get tricky for quarterbacks, right? And that's why there's so much quarterback movement all the time. I want to hit on something else that I found interesting. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about this because we spend so much time talking about the players that have left. We've spent so much time talking about the portal. the players that you need to get, the portal needs. There's been some really key retention spots for the Badgers. I want to talk about Dilon Jones, the running back from last year's class. Didn't play a lot. That wasn't a guarantee that you were going to be able to keep him. That's a player that was highly coveted as a 2024 recruit, 4-star kid. They had to fend off Ohio State for him, some SEC schools for him. That was a player that was very much in demand. Didn't play a lot this year. That's a player they had to kind of fight to keep this year. Now, I think you're keeping guys because for the most part, and I've said this several times, I spoke about this when Tretch came back. I think you're keeping guys because players are still buying into what they see in Madison. It's not just because Wisconsin's overpaying everybody. It's because they're still buying in. I think that's important. And I think it's super important with a guy like Dilon Jones because you look at this offense with Coach Grimes. He wants to run the ball, and he wants to run the ball a lot. Averaged 38 carries a year last year for Kansas. He's had a running game everywhere he's been. You need 2 backs. And they didn't recruit one in the 2025 class. So if you were to lose a Dilon Jones, you would have had to go to the portal. You would have to go to the portal. You would have to find another body. And that's tough sometimes. There's running backs in the portal. But you saw with Tyree. Tyree was a solid back. But you would rather that be a younger guy with more upside. That's what Dilon Jones is. Keeping Dilon Jones means 2 things. It means players are still buying into what is happening in Madison. That's not an in-state kid. That's an out-of-state blue chip running back with a lot of options. He's sticking around despite not playing a lot. That should make you feel confident. It also tells you that they're buying into the vision. The players, whether it's Tretch coming back, whether it's Dilon Jones, it's telling you that they like the initial impression of what they've seen from Coach Grimes, what that message is. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect all the time, but they are coming back to buy into that. And then you have Renfro coming back, which we haven't talked about, but you have your starting center coming back, and you have Riley Malman coming back. So again, that offensive line that we were a little worried about potentially being maybe too green because we knew Nelson was going to go. We thought Malman might leave. Huber's going to go. We're not sure on Renfro. This is from a conversation early in the year. We're like, man, you might have 4 new starters on that line next year. Well, now you look at it, Renfro's back, Brunner's back, Malman's back. Haywood's going to take over at left tackle. Suddenly, you feel pretty good about that offensive line. You got to figure out one more guard spot, whether that's Emerson Mandel, whether that's maybe a portal guy, maybe it's Nelson, the Vanderbilt transfer from last year, even though I think he's more of a swing tackle. But suddenly, that offensive line looks better. You have an offensive line type OC coming in Grimes. You have AJ Blazik in his second year with that group, and we really like what he is and what he is as a coach. Suddenly, you start to look and say, okay, if you can figure out the quarterback spot, and let's say it is a Fernando Mendoza, now you have those running backs back. That offensive line isn't as much of a worry. And you kind of like this new offensive coordinator and the way he's going to fit more of a traditional Wisconsin style onto this. Everywhere he's been, he's run the ball really well. That's what he does. It feels like a nice fit. And I'm not as worried about the offensive line anymore. And that's where, again, getting those players back, having them buy into the vision. If you're looking for reasons to be optimistic as a Badger fan, and there's plenty of reasons to be pessimistic. We've done it on this show. But if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic, look at the players they're retaining. Tretch coming back out of the portal to stay with Wisconsin. Dilon Jones not going anywhere. Up to this point, portal's not over. Vinny Anthony staying. Riley Malman coming back. Those offensive pieces coalescing a little bit around this new offensive coordinator should make you feel a little more confident, especially if they can nail down that quarterback spot. All right, we'll take one more quick second for our friends of the show. I'm going to come back and talk about the 2025 schedule. I know a lot of people are frustrated by it. Some are even a little freaked out by it. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I don't think you should be. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel rocks. Man, that is the official sports book of the NFL. You know how many sports books there are out there? Getting the NFL, man, that's like landing the dream client. I've never successfully done that. I've never landed the dream client. Locked On certainly didn't land the dream client for Locked On Badgers, right? So, like, FanDuel is ridiculous if they got the NFL, if they're the official sports book of the National Football League. Like, what else do I need to say? This ad read should be that, and then me staring at the camera for 40 seconds in silence. Goodwill Hunting style. I mean, I'm not going to do that because that's going to be awkward. We'll make eye contact and we'll tell stories with our eyes together. But FanDuel's awesome. Parlays, futures, teasers, spreads. Right now, new customers get up to $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with a $5 winning bet over at FanDuel. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. They are incredible, fast, easy, simple. over at FanDuel.com. Spice up your weekend. Do it responsibly over at FanDuel.com. Okay, let's talk 2025 schedule. The horror of it, right? And I saw this going around on Twitter with just people looking at that middle stretch. And listen, that middle stretch is a beast. That middle stretch is a beast, right? You got Iowa, you got Michigan, you got Ohio State, you got Oregon. You're not going to be favored in any of those games. Well, I think you may. Let's see about the Iowa one. I think there's a chance you're favored in the Iowa one. You're not going to be favored in those other three. You're not. You're not going to be favored against Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan's on the road. You're not going to be favored against those other three. Yeah, that's a terrible schedule. Here's what I'd say. Here's why I'm not that stressed about the schedule. The first thing is maybe this isn't a reason that other people will take. Wisconsin feasted on bad schedules for like a decade in the Big Ten West. Just feasted on them. And listen, we would get an Ohio State. We would get a Michigan too. And I think Wisconsin tried to up that ante with out-of-conference schedules. They did. They had an LSU and a Bama. So kudos to Wisconsin for trying to augment the Big Ten West schedule. But we don't have any room to complain about tough schedules, in my opinion. We just don't. We lived in the Big Ten West. If you want to be a real Big Ten, big boy program, you can't go around complaining about schedules. You just can't. SEC West schools for the longest time, or East schools, sorry, for the long West or East. Now I'm getting my brain mixed up. But like there's schools that every year are playing Bama, Georgia, Auburn. You just can't complain about schedules. Every year, if you're an Indiana fan, or every year if you're a Michigan State fan, you're playing Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, right? Yeah. As Wisconsin fans, we don't have room to complain. We just don't from that sense. So that's the first reason. This is just kind of penance for a decade of weak schedules. Now we got to suck it up and be a real big boy Big Ten team. And that's okay. The other thing that I like is you look at the schedule, and it's actually a relatively easy beginning and a relatively easy end. So you kind of have the ability to build some momentum early. Obviously, you have that Bama game at Tuscaloosa. You're going to lose that. But the other three games, your two early ones, and then the one against Maryland, those are all winnable. You can go 3-1 in that stretch, get a bye, head into your tough 4-game stretch, and then you get another bye. Right? The byes are perfect on this schedule. The byes are perfect. They bracket the hardest part of the schedule. So you get a bye going into that 4-game stretch, and then you get a bye coming out of it. And then the ending isn't as difficult either. Right? The ending is those traditional Big Ten Westish teams that Wisconsin has to beat. But you don't have an Oregon in that ending stretch. You don't have a Penn State. You don't have a Michigan. You don't have an Ohio State. You have a Minnesota. Tough game, sure. You have an Illinois. Tough game, sure. You have an Indiana. Tough game, sure. Indiana's not going to be as good next year, I don't think. Iowa's not going to be as good next year, I don't think. Iowa loses like 9 starters on defense. Indiana's going to lose a bunch of dudes. And let's see how they look against a real schedule. I'm not throwing shade on Indiana. You give them credit for beating who they should beat. Wisconsin had an easy schedule last year, and they didn't take advantage of it. So give credit to Indiana. Indiana feels like a tech.com bubble to me that's going to burst next year. So I think you have an ability to start fast with that schedule. Then you get a bye. You have your brutal 4-game stretch, okay, where you're probably going to go 1-3 at best. But then you get another bye and you can finish strong. I just don't think it's that crazy. If we want to be a real big boy program and we want to hire a Luke Fickell and we want to talk about playing for championships, you can't complain about a tough schedule. You just can't. You suck it up because that's what the best teams do. And this won't be the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. It won't be, it'll be one of them, but it's not going to be the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. There's going to be other teams with a higher strength of schedule. And even this year, if you look at our strength of schedule this year, it's not top 5. Go look at it. It's in the 20s or 30s. I looked the other day. So as hard as we think our schedule is, it's not an insanely tough schedule. And if we just were a better team, we would manage it. We'd manage it better. So that's where I'm at, man. Hold on one sec. Oh, sorry about that. I had to cough. Oh, here's the other thing I was going to say on this. This also balances out. So yes, next year's tough. And then in 26, it opens up. So if you're going to complain about a tough schedule this year, then, don't or how should I say it? If you're going to complain about a tough 2025 schedule, well, then you're going to get an easy 2026 schedule. So just understand that this is always going to be rotating. Like next year, Iowa has a much more difficult schedule. They had an easy one this year. Nebraska has an easy schedule next year. And then in 26, they get hammered. This is just how it works. So in the 2026 schedule, we're not playing Ohio State. We're not playing Oregon. We're not playing Penn State. I think we just have to play. We get Penn State, but I think we just have to play Penn State and USC. And then it's kind of run-of-the-mill Big Ten teams. So again, these schedules even out. And if you want to be a big-time program, you play big-time schedules. It's just as simple as that. get better, take care of business, and I think we'll be just fine. All right. On Wisconsin, thank you all for tuning in. Sorry I had to cough a couple times in this show. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten or the Locked On College channel for all the biggest news over there. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in as always on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.